Well, maybe it's okay as long as it's not, you know, it wasn't someone peeing in their pants.
No, that's the that's the fish tank.
See, now that loses the mystique. It's a fish tank. Oh man.
I like Steve's explanation
Yeah, I
better.
was thinking, yeah, you know, that blows my whole thing.
There you go. Hey guys, we're live, and it's great to see everybody wherever you all might be. Everyone looks like they're in very different environments, and we're going to talk a little bit about studio design today, right? And what we're up to and where it's going, and maybe we'll start by and the fish tank, and but maybe we'll start by just saying hi, and I'm Stuart. Johnny's down there. It's my buddy. And Fran kind of hooked this whole thing up. So maybe Fran, you want to say hi and tell us what's going on?
Hey, everybody. Francis Manzella from FM Design here. Hoping we put together an interesting group of people. Let everybody go around and introduce themselves. On my screen, Matt Marinelli's next to me, so I'll pass to him. You're muted, Matt. You're muted, Matt.
Oh, hey.
Got him now.
You have me? Sorry. Matt Marinelli from Coral Sound. We do systems design and integration, and I'm an engineer as well.
Matt Azevedo is next on my screen. Unmute.
I'm Matt Azevedo. I'm a staff scientist at Centec, who's a broad acoustical consulting practice, and a mastering engineer and musician.
Oh, great.
John Agnello.
Me? Oh, I'm co-host with Stuart for Gear Club. I'm a music producer, recording engineer, mixer, whatever. Sometimes janitor, because I have to clean a lot of shit up. Yeah, that's it.
Steve Remote.
Yeah, I am a recording engineer, mix engineer, music producer, video director, recording studio designer, and I own Aura Sonic, which is a mobile audio and location audio production company.
What are you doing in your spare time?
Jim Keller, introduce yourself.
Hey, yeah, Jim Keller. I have a business called Sondus, and we build recording studios, so acoustics and design, construction, and engineering background for years working in studios.
Greg, you're up. You're muted.
There we go. Yeah, hi, Greg Morris. I work with Fran, doing all the great stuff we do at FM Design, from speakers to built environments.
And Mark Bickerstaffe, please.
Oh yeah, we're studio builders. I'm working with BDCG right now at the moment. We're mainly out of New York City. We do anything from sound isolation, studios, AR rooms, personal rooms, a multitude of different applications when it comes to sound isolation.
You can't isolate the fish tank, can you?
And Jeff Madison, please.
Hey, everyone. I'm a one-time musician and recording engineer turned acoustical engineer. I've been with RPG for about 20 years. And we do custom acoustical treatments for lots of spaces with a specialty in studios.
Awesome. So think that's everybody. If I missed anybody.
Welcome, guys.
Hey, Fran, first question for you. What kind of speakers are behind you?
Well, I'm sitting in my office today. I am isolated in my office. Greg's working from home. And the back side of our office is kind of set up as a showroom for the Griffin Audio USA speakers that my company builds and sells. So those are the largest speakers on the outside, the Griffin G1 mastering speakers. And then there's actually a surround setup of the smaller Griffin G2 speakers. So yeah, we have a little demo room in the back of the office.
Are they powered?
Yes.
Wow, very cool. Maybe you can blow our heads off.
Oh, you want them to make music?
But oh, that. Speaking of, how's everybody doing? You know, with what's coming down the road, or anybody? Can anyone predict what's coming down the road or foresee?
A big slowdown.
Well, I gotta say, in the live entertainment, live, performance vibe, I think we're gonna be the last ones on the list, man.
Yeah.
You know, we're literally, I think studios are gonna be able to pop up. I saw a buddy of mine, Lou Holtzman from Eastside Sound, put up a little video yesterday that was kind of impressive. You know, basically saying, hey man, we got 6 isolation booths. He has a workaround on how to make sure everybody's careful and comfortable. And so I think studios will have a good shot at coming back online very soon. But I think the live performance concert world, man, I have some really excellent workarounds on how that could happen, but it needs a lot of commitment by the sponsors and producers of these future shows.
And give us an example of a workaround.
Well, you know, interestingly, I've been thinking about this for a month and a half, talking to certain people, and then of course, people in Hungary, and I forget where it was, Denmark or somewhere else, came up with this whole drive-in thing of literally creating concert venues in a drive-in situation. Now, 8 years ago, 2012, I put together a package of an 18-day show that was literally going to be based around this whole, drive-in mentality, that it was all about vehicles, meaning that we had 6 mobile units that were going to be on the road. 2 of them were going to be tour buses, that each one would be an audio and a video editing bay. So we'd have a day and night crew. So let's say the first show happens, you capture it. Now that night we're editing, getting it ready for the next show's performance, because some of the elements of the night before was going to be part of the second day. When we get to each venue, the idea was everything would be all self-contained, meaning we'd have food trucks, we'd have obviously mobile and audio and video trucks and all that happening. But when people were showing up, they were going to show up with their vehicles also, and have either obviously either FM broadcasting or via via an app or Wi-Fi or something to that effect, so people can enjoy the concert in their house, in their offices, not offices, in their vehicles. And the idea was strategically working it out that, we can have RVs, SUVs, cars, vans, all sorts of stuff. So of course the smaller vehicles would be closer to the front. And the idea would be to have the bands performing, and at the same time that's happening, have either some ghost mirror situation, or if we had the technology, hologram or something. But the idea was planted in my brain 8 years ago. Try to get the funding for it, without figuring all the numbers. It was over $4 million to do these 18 shows. So that kind of went on a side burner. But now it's, getting closer to that front burner, man. It just seems like this could be, something outstanding, and not just your normal concert with the, drive-in mentality, even though that's still a great idea if that can be pulled off.
How does it work for the band?
Well, well, that's the whole thing. I mean, I think we have to find bands that are obviously going to be, testing negative, right? So we got to make sure that our crew staff that will be a lot closer together than everybody else has to be a tight team that's going to be monitored all the time. But basically, when the bands are performing, the idea is to do something similar to what people are doing now with live stream, is actually record all the parts at other times. So then you're now putting this all together with some people live on stage and the rest is all playback. Crazy enough, in the 80s, I had a band called Remote Men, and we were a 3-piece, and we used to play with a 2-track machine with all our other parts that were recorded in the studio were, you know, playing as a playback. And with the idea that one day that would be either banks of TV monitors or hologram or ghost mirror or, you know, iMag or something like that. So when we go out and perform, that all the other parts, you know, so I could be playing bass live and maybe drums on video. And so I'm bringing back stuff that I thought about decades ago and 8 years ago, and trying to put it all together now as something relevant. And what's good about it is, if I get any bites on this, trying to work out all the technical stuff now. But when I do go run this idea, I have all my notes from years of doing this, figuring this out. So
God knows Steve knows how to keep some notes. I've seen
oh
it.
man, I wish I could turn the camera over to, I got pretty much a hard copy of notes of every gig I ever did. Well, let's say 80% of every gig I ever did since Frank Zappa gig, October 81. So it's like, you know, I can, and what's cool, some of the elements of my notes are in a database. So at any time, if I work with a band that I've worked for, or been at a location that I've been to, or something that's relative, I'll look up on the database and say, and then find where it is, go pull my notes. And then there's my whole laundry list of who the people that were in the crew, who was involved, what are the best restaurants and hotels and all that stuff that we gather every gig.
It must be amazing to look at that stuff like a decade later and
Oh
see
my God. Or decades.
how much of it, though, how much is still pertinent? Like, are you using the same kind of equipment?
Oh,
Are the
sure.
restaurants still open? You know, is that guy who worked the crew, is he gone? You know, it's got to be pretty startling sometimes, you know.
But what's so cool about that idea is when you pull out those notes and you make that conference call and you start saying, hey, is Tim McKenna still there, or whatever that might be, they go, oh yeah, of course he's here and he's working, blah blah blah, or no, that guy passed, or you know, she's now working across town at another place. So it opens up the dialogue. Yeah. And the idea is, you know, you have these notes, and now you're creating a new, I call it a location file, short for a location production file. And so, you know, now you're creating the new file. So you take that and you save it as, and now you add the new production managers and stage managers and all the people that are relative. And oh, that Midas analog console's not there anymore. There's a Behringer there now, you know. It's like, Behringer, what, you know. But it's very incredibly helpful. And what's so great about it is it brings back awesome memories to the people I'm talking to. And so now you're talking to new people you haven't met before, and you already broke the ice by bringing up, you know, loved ones from the past, you know, whether they're there or not, you know. So it's helpful. And of course, you know, directions and where to avoid or what to do, or happy experiences is great to bring that back. And moreover, you know, some of the bands, you know, you see exactly what, sometimes, you know, the input sheet doesn't change much. So you look back and you go, oh yeah, I got the writer from the band. This is what they were using. This is what we changed. You know, you already have that kind of figured out, you know. And
well, there's no doubt, Steve, that your end of our business is going to be one of the latest ones or last ones to be able to get back to some sense of normalcy. But, you know, thinking about the studio business, and I've been, as you said, I've been thinking about it a lot for the past 6, 7, 8 weeks, and, you know, wondering about how that model moves forward in the current situation. And, you know, there's a need, and I'm sure it's a pent up need at this point for post-production, because, you know, there's a lot of things that were either in the can or productions that got halted that they had to stop production on. So I think personally that post-production is going to be one of the first things to come back online, and they'll have to figure out how to do what they do: mix, record, VO, you know, ADR. And I think that we'll learn as an industry, will learn a lot from the lessons that they learn during startup. Because, you know, it's like how many old baseball games am I going to watch? It's like people want something new. And, you know, I don't know how the music recording business or that paradigm moves forward. I suspect that we're looking at another phase of a boom at home recording studios.
Well,
And-
no doubt. And I think what would be very clever is for the producer or recording engineer to create a package that's sent out to all the, you know, you do the research, right? Okay, what room are you going to use in? What acoustics do we need to have set up? So, you know, gobos and tube traps and stuff like that, bass traps, and then having a particular package that would be the proper miking and the quality A to D and D to A converters that everybody's going to get. So it's not like some of these live streams that you see and hear, and one connection's this amazing sound and it sounds incredible, and then somebody's on an iPhone doing a guitar part, and it's like, you know. So if everybody has some sort of similar situation, I'm working right now trying to put together a project that I'm trying to find musicians with their own studios. So at least we got the audio quality right. So then it's about finding the right camera that's small enough, that's going to be high quality enough. And I want to capture it at least 4K. And of course, we'll downsize it to 720 for the stream. But, you know, be great to archivally have, I don't even know if that's a word, but, you know, but in an archival purpose, to have this high quality recording with at least a 4K camera or no less than a 2K camera. So then you have all this future stuff available. Then, you know, send it over to your post guy, and they start putting together the record and stuff like that. And adding to what you were saying about bringing back the studio. So imagine this. So you have an A-list artist has a wonderful studio at their house. There's plenty of land on their property. You pull up a few of my mobile units, so let's say the Expando, Elroy's the drum booth, and then the Breadmobile's the guitar room, which might have, you know, it's sectioned off so I can have 2 or 3 or 4 guitar cabinets in there. And now everybody's in their own room with their own interfacing that's tying in to the location that we're at. And then because of the fact of the advent of using Cat6 conductivity, go analog, when we're at festivals, sometimes we're running 700, 900 feet of cable. We even tested it to 1,200 feet of cable and running audio, and everybody's in sync. You're not dealing with an A to D converter and any kind of internet delay or anything, you know. So that is a good possibility of actually turning that possibility, you know, similar to what even Lou Holtzman was saying about, he has all these isolation booths. Well, mine are on wheels, so we can actually park them where we have. So you have the egress that's not, you know, touching anybody else, and, you know, everyone has its own air conditioner. Everything's all self-contained. So, you know, with a couple of porta potties and a couple of stuff, you can actually pull this off in a grand scale, you know. So that's a possibility that could happen, you know. So
I'd like to ask the contractor guys who are here, Jim and Mark, what their business has been like, and what's on their horizon. Has there been any new inquiries or anything like that, or what's it look like on your horizon, guys? Jim, you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. So we have 2 projects in the city, one of which we were almost done with. We were down to like punch list, you know. And the other one is Fran, you know, you designed it, beautiful room for Fred Kevorkian, and that one's stalled. So, you know, we're waiting for just guidance from DOB, local municipality clearance, and we're excited to get back to work. And we actually have we're looking at, I'm bidding on a project now it's a large scale project that is so far moving forward. I mean, the potential client has a lease signed and everything, so, but they're moving forward. And I think, I mean, part of what our specialty in the past, at least, has been small private rooms and, you know, musicians and producers' homes and things like that. But we have been building bigger facilities for other designers lately. And I'm fairly confident that this is a temporary thing. I think that I feel like we're going to be, you know, maybe if it's a slowdown for a year, it's a slowdown, but I think that, you know, major shifts in the way things happen. Obviously, live will be last to come back, and that's a shame. But, you know, I think that I'm confident or hopeful that things are going to just kind of get back to normal in 6 to 12 months.
You and me both. I hope it's even sooner. But Mark, what's your take on construction in this specialty industry moving forward?
Okay, right now we've been working on a project in Jersey City. It's Hudson County School of Technology, and because it's a school, we can still work. It started back in November, and now we're on the wrap up, the finish stage. So, Fran, as you know, we had to shut down for like 6 weeks because the bug bit me, and we couldn't work. So
Yeah, Mark's a survivor, everybody, guys.
For you.
Outstanding.
yeah, it was bloody awful. But we're back in there as of Monday, and we're allowed to work.
Oh,
So
great.
we're going to continue there.
Where is the school?
It's in Jersey City,
No, but I used to live in Jersey City. I'm just curious where it is.
Montgomery Street,
Oh, cool. And Montgomery and what?
525 Montgomery. Does that
So
make sense?
downtown by the river or
It's
up by the college?
ooh, I couldn't. It's right where the turnpike overpass.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Cool.
Okay. It's a nice project. It was a really big project, deep pockets, and you know, they want us to push it ahead, so we're working on that.
What about new inquiries, Mark? What about new bids and stuff?
We put in a bid for a project downtown before things went nuts, and the contractor, because it's a really difficult load in, it's down by the bowl. It's a big project. What happened is they asked us if we want to do the whole project, but Fran, our project coming up that I inquired about, I couldn't get a commitment of when they went to start it, so we had to back out of the first stage, but they're probably going to let us have a shot at the finishes on the second stage, which is probably better because it's an awful, because this other contractor, he just pulled out. And he used the excuse of the you know, the shutdown or what have you.
Yeah.
But I think he underbid it, to be honest. So that's what happened there. We also have a project with you, Fran, that you know, we're waiting on what I just was discussing there.
Yeah.
Waiting to see where they go. And we're also doing another project. It's a company out of California who had deep pockets and wanted to do everything. They went crazy, but all of a sudden the brakes are coming on because one of the huge clients was the Olympic Games, and that got shut down. So you know, when their revenue doesn't come in, then they don't want to put it back out again. But that project was rolling and still is. So, you know, it was committed. A lot of commitment went into it. So we'll see what happens there.
You know,
But-
we've been doing a fair amount of work that wouldn't be traditional recording studios. In other words, clients who are not traditional clients, either institutional clients or commercial other businesses, you know, stuff I'm not allowed to drop names on. And, you know, it's interesting to see or to think about companies with particularly deep pockets. Are they gonna, you know, be looking at pulling back because everybody's net worth just went down and, you know, for whatever reason it might be, or are they going to be full steam ahead? And I really don't know. I have my misgivings about any upcoming institutional projects, because I think the model for higher education might be changing. I don't know. But, you know, if I look at NYU as an example, we just finished up a very large project with working with Matt and Coral Sound over there. And, you know, I don't know when they're going to be able to go back in and use these facilities. So how will institutional clients look at large projects moving forward? I have no idea. You know, Matt, you guys do a fair amount of institutional work, don't you?
Yeah, well, you know, Ascendec is a very, you know, we're not a studio company. We do everything from product noise to rail noise, power generation, you know, the full boat of acoustic services. And you know, higher ed is a big segment for us, and we do a lot. And you know, most of the, you know, we do some private studios. We've done a few, you know, we've done a few large broadcast studios, but a lot of our performing arts and studio work is all tends to be higher ed projects, and some you know fancier high school type projects.
Sure.
And the stuff we had in the pipe that was already in the design process, I haven't seen many projects that had already been greenlit stopping. You know, the stuff that we were already in design on is moving forward. But the thing we are seeing is that, particularly in higher ed type situations, you know, there's a lot, you know, none of the schools know if they're going to have any money next year. You know, anything that was at the funding phase, the proposal phase, you know, RFPs, you know, everyone's taking a step back because, you know, when did the students come back? You know, when do the students come back? When they do come back, are we all going to have to start, you know, it's one of those things where if they want to come back right away, we can design, you know, either really big classrooms so you can get 6-foot spacing between desks and allow for all that stuff. But, you know, is that, I don't think anyone's ready to invest the money to do that, not knowing, you know, if there's a vaccine in 6 months, you're going to feel really stupid about that.
Well, just a question about space 6 feet apart. What does that do to the acoustics of a classroom? How do you are now there going to be you know, microphones and to hear people?
Yeah, well, you know, we do a lot of, you know, big lecture halls, and even in modern big lecture hall stuff, things we've done for, like, say, Harvard Business School, you know, there's extensive voice lift systems built into these large rooms, so you can get cross classroom communication when the classroom's 80 feet wide. So the technology exists to get that kind of, you know, traditional back and forth classroom experience with the right kind of AV infrastructure, but you know, not everyone's good Harvard business kind of pockets. So
exactly,
you know, these aren't cheap systems, and I don't think, I mean, certainly for, you know, our typical K through 12 projects, you know, we're you know, scraping against the budget to get enough layers of drywall on the wall, and telling everyone they have to put a voiceless system in every single classroom. You know, local governments can't afford that. So it's really, you know, I think at some point, you know, could be 6 months, probably not. You know, hopefully it'll be sooner than 2 years. Things get back to some semblance of normal. But for that gap between, you know, before and until there's a vaccine, the conditions are so different. The needs of the users are so different. There's, you know, we're involved in conversations about, you know, how to move forward on this stuff in that 2-year gap. But I think, you know,
that's what I'm talking about, Matt. You know, it's like nobody really knows yet, and I think that the things that go first will be, you know, there's going to be a canary in a coal mine, and you know, I think post-production is going to be a bit of a canary. I think that the universities that are brave enough, or in states that are whatever, you know, that open first, they're going to learn stuff from this, and you know, I don't know what's going to happen. So I think for us, and I think for everybody on the screen, you know, the key is to stay nimble and to stay adaptive and be ready to adapt to the requirements of our customers, right? And that means everybody from a guy who needs to do a vocal session to a customer who wants to design multiple recording studios. You know, do we design something today based on the current situation that, as you said, Matt, is a crazy economic consideration to allow for this additional space? I don't see that happening. I
No,
don't see
no.
even higher ed saying, well, now we're going to design control rooms with 6 feet between students because we've proven that something like this can happen. It's not going to happen. So I don't know.
But even if we came up with some solution, technically have that in place, the bigger issue is egress in and out. So yeah, even if there is this distance and stuff, you go to the grocery store, you see we stay 6 feet apart on the line if you're lucky. But when you get in there, people are passing you by, lunging across you anyway, because everybody's human, right? So how do we deal with that is a bigger issue. Like
It's
when
kind of a societal issue though.
right. So I wonder, like you said, I wonder if it's really that important to be redesigning things in a much grander, larger scale, or do we really try to, really get everybody into a new mindset? It's I hate that thing about, new normal or whatever, but maybe it's a novel standard that we have to have now, that it's, no more shaking, let's bow like our Asian associates do.
I'm feeling the bow. I'm all for the bow.
I'm a big fan of the salute. As
Salute
that works too.
I don't even want to do this, guys. I don't even want to get that close.
I don't like that. That doesn't work. Because then I might scratch my elbow.
Hey, Jeff Madison, from a specialty manufacturer's point of view, what do you see?
Well, we over the last 6-7 weeks, actually, our backlog has been growing. Those are the jobs out that people have decided to not pull the plug on and have kept them moving. I think it was just the timing was the timing. It wasn't anything special, but summer's always a big time because usually higher ed's trying to get their buildings done. They want to get them finished up before the fall. What I don't see is what the architects, what Matt and companies like Eventide sees is really the farther out view of what's just in the proposal stage, getting early information on, early budgets and things like that. We're involved sometimes there, but we don't see that far out. So right now, we've pulled back we're at about 75% capacity. That time is being utilized to the max. Our entire office is working remote. So everybody's still, our estimators couldn't be busier. Our project managers are managing the stuff that's coming in. So from a near-term view, it's disrupted our organization and our flow, but really it hasn't disrupted the output, or the work that we do day in and day out. But I wonder about the farther ahead story, because there's it's got to be coming. I mean, we're funding a pandemic from a boom economy that once that money's gone, we might need more, but the funding is going to be less because the economy is going to be less. And so is it a spiral?
Yeah, look, I see the exact same thing that I saw after 2008. And that 2008 took 18 months to hit my business because we had work in the pipeline in 2008 and we were busy through most of 2009, and then it just started to dry up. And, I don't think this one's going to take that long. I'm looking out 3 or 4 months and going, okay, so this is the work that's normally coming into the pipeline now. If the phones are quiet and that work isn't coming into the pipeline now, I'm looking at, this pipeline process that runs anywhere from 8 weeks to 3 or 4, 5, 6 months. It's that period where I'm concerned personally for my business's model. You know, and the good news is, you know, we actually had another project that was on hold for non-COVID related reasons come back online this week. So was a pleasant surprise. And the other good news is that all of our customers have paid us so far. So that's good
Yeah.
news. But
How
because you
long
get
were
worried
you
about
affected
how
after-
people,
How long were
sorry?
you affected after 2008? Like how long a drag was that?
2000 and second half of 09 into 2010 was pretty slow.
Right.
Pretty slow. And then it hasn't slowed down since then. It's my company has done nothing but grow like gangbusters since then.
But do you think that like that was just a financial crisis? This now we're starting to talk about possibly design being different. And is that like something you guys are thinking, you know, shifting concept for how to
Let
build?
me jump in, which I think this could be a win-win situation on the design factor. So instead of now going and building larger rooms, why not really create remote applications? And each remote location has a decent sounding visual and oral spectrum. So when you're in that room, looking at the lecturer or the recording engineer, showing their works, that the students can be in a open environment or some other environment within the campus that is now plausible. So let's say, for an example,
But Steve, how does that relate to a hands-on education program like music engineering, for instance?
well, that's the whole thing. I mean, there are, you know, it is a kind of tough situation, and I think on a big scope, you do it with apps that are controlling the consoles, and then you have a one-on-one or 2 or 3 people at the same time that may go into the control room at a scheduled time. So the people that don't necessarily need to have that twist the knob sensation is operating and doing things with their iPad or other type of tablet device, but also can schedule a one-on-one with the control room. You know, I don't, thinking out loud here. I don't know how.
No, spitballing is what it's about. But
Yeah,
Matt,
I
what
don't
do
know how large the rooms are, but I meaning how many people are in this session at any one time in a class. But I couldn't imagine it being more than 12, because you know, more students in the room. Yeah, I don't know how anybody can pay attention to what's going on. I don't know what are the sizes, Fran? And
Well, in my experience, for the types of programs that we design these specialty studio rooms for, they're generally occupied by between 10 and 15 people, but they want them sized for up to 20 or 21 because everybody wants to look at growing their programs and increasing their enrollment. I'm just wondering, Matt Marinelli, if you have anything that comes to mind based on, you know, this conversation, because we've just finished up a fairly extensive educational system, and what Steve was talking about is what are your thoughts on all this?
I mean, we had a pretty substantial crossover when NYU opened a new facility, and we were still on site finishing up the rooms that were yet to go online. And it was interesting to get a bit of an inside peek into their program. And I think with a hands-on program like an education or a music program, your class sizes are small to begin with. And, you know, remote learning is not the easiest for those kind of subjects. And I think, you know, when those schools are back online and they have students, I actually feel like those programs are probably the least affected because they're not 200-person lectures.
True.
We're looking at education from our viewpoint, you know, as music makers, you know, relevant to music programs in schools. But I think actually, in a way, those hands-on engineering programs may be, you know, the least affected in that their class sizes are by nature relatively small. I think at NYU, their largest in-studio class was 22 people. And typically the classes were 12 people or under. I mean, the rooms, as you know, Frans, since you designed them, weren't designed, most of them, to accommodate more than that many students at a time. So,
but in tight quarters, in
tight quarters, but
desk to desk to desk quarters.
I don't see a situation where you teach a hands-on course like an engineering course or a production course music performance, all the courses that they teach as part of that program. I don't see how, regardless of the size of the room, that those don't take place in close quarters, because the exchange of ideas is about being close and having somebody show you something
Exactly.
directly. So I think
Students in
if
there.
that's not possible, obviously they're engaged in, you know, kind of remote education right now, remote learning right now. And I think, you know, the feedback I got when they first started, when I was still in touch with folks in the program, was, you know, that's an uphill battle.
Yeah.
It's an uphill battle to teach somebody how to do something creative in person, but to do it, you know, across the internet, you know, is certainly difficult. That said, I think there's some interesting opportunities, because I think leading up to this, both education and just music production in general have been geared more and more over the years, obviously, to collaboration. And now people who weren't collaborating remotely are being forced to, because of the circumstances, which is unfortunate on some level, but also really interesting on another level, in that, you know, I have a lot of musician friends who make the majority of their income from touring, and obviously they're all home now, and they're looking at collaborating where they hadn't done any kind of, like, you know, trading of sessions or collaboration remotely before this situation. They're engaging in that now, and I think that there's a lot of interesting opportunities there. We've already, the groundwork has already been laid for that. I mean, if 20 years ago somebody had given me a session and said that we would be, you know, laying down basics in one studio and then just kind of sending the session around to random people to record on their own and get those tracks back and sift through them, and that would be the final, that would have been not
Sure.
unthinkable. It certainly was done, but it wasn't the norm, and it is kind of the norm now for a lot of projects. So, you know, to throw a positive spin on it, I would say we're not in completely uncharted territory here as far as music production and education. I think there's an uphill battle to figure out how to make those things. You know, I love when people are together in a room. That's what I love about engineering. That's what I love about music making. I think most of us will probably agree. It's being in the room with other people who inspire you and make you feel creative is probably why most of us got into some form of this industry. And I can't wait for that to come back. But I'm also really interested to see what people do creatively with the limitations that are presented to them now. Because
and we've all already seen some really cool stuff. I'm sorry, Stuart, what were you gonna say?
Well, I just wanted to read a comment we just got that pertains to some of this. It's not a question, it's just a comment. As a former director of admissions at a pro audio school that already limited classes to 12 students, I'd say that classes much smaller than that can't be supported without pushing tuition into the impossible range.
Yeah.
Good
Yep.
point.
Well, you know, let me add to that. So, Fran, you were saying how basically the rooms are about 12 students with the capability of going to 25. Well, if everybody's not in a cluster, which that usually happens, you know, you buddy up with people that are in the class or you sit next to each other. Well, now that's going to have to change. You know, we stay 6-7 feet apart from each other. You now that 20, you know, that 25, you know, occupancy space will now have to be spread out to accommodate
The 12.
the 12, 10 or 12 people, you know?
And they'll start making use of these video systems that we put in to all the studios over the consoles
Right.
that nobody ever uses. They'll start using that because, you know, what invariably happens when I see a class in session is, you know, everybody's huddled around the console. If they're doing something that's a hands-on thing, and it makes all the sense in the world, why wouldn't you? And, you know, but yeah, that's gonna.
No, but that's the beautiful thing about it. So imagine you're in the room, a couple of people get up to bat to do their thing, but everybody's watching that over that camera over the console on their iPad. I mean, what
Exactly what the Jersey
like,
City jobs laid out. It's exactly the same. Bleachers, stepping back,
Yep.
with it, and then a couple of people up front around the console with the big video screen. It's exactly the way they have it.
Yeah.
Probably for like 10 to 12 people. So they're like pushing ahead. They want to do it. And,
you know, and another thing is that what Bill Mueller put together is that UVC little wand that he moves across the top of the console and disinfects it. So that's something that should be definitely incorporated in all these schools. Like,
I'm not aware of that. What is it?
yeah, he's basically, you know, he's got one of those Trump UV things. Instead of putting it in your body. Wait, we're not going to do politics. I'm sorry. So I don't know what that is, what I just said. But what I do know, he put together a wand, a UVC wand. And basically, he's now cleaning the console by starting from the left or right, and is moving it over the console. And basically disinfecting the console without.
Do we have data to support that a pass of UVC is actually a disinfectant? I thought that.
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
I thought there was some need for prolonged exposure to UV, though.
I don't believe so. I think it's a matter of how close it is and how powerful it is. I wish Bill was here to kind of chime in on the comments, but. That's definitely the way to go. It seems like a standard. I was going to get his notes and diagrams and try to build one myself so I can keep my consoles clean.
Wait, Steve, you mean all the consoles we've been using all these years weren't disinfected before?
Well, that's funny you start saying that, because you know what I hate more than ever? All these damn commercials, all these big posters at all the stores, like, oh, we don't, after we bake it, we don't touch it and it's sanitized. Well, what the fuck were you doing prior to that? Like, what do you mean it's now it's not, now it's sanitized. It's like,
Hey,
well,
guys,
Before we were sneezing on all your food, so don't worry about it.
You're lucky.
And then I'm worrying about sanitized food when you're ordering from Domino's. I'm trying to figure that out, how that works, Like you already shouldn't be ingesting that in the first place.
Yeah. So how about this? Anybody, I mean, we can go around and just, are there any like favorite projects that you guys have done, like that stand out in whatever way? Aesthetically, sonically, financially?
Yeah.
Mark, what's yours?
It was a project we did downtown, Fran, which we're not allowed to show photographs of.
Yeah, we could tell you about it, but we'd have to kill you.
It was friggin' amazing. It's just a shame you can't see it.
Yeah, I don't have any pictures of that one.
But it was a
I might have
great
accidentally
together?
posted some.
Sorry?
I might have accidentally posted some.
Yeah, me, Matt, and Mark all worked on that one, and yeah, the owner was a very private individual and just insisted that there be no pictures taken. And we're walking around with the iPhones going like, it's like,
It was a 2-year project. It was huge.
What's so special about the project, though?
Beautiful studio.
Yeah.
it was unique. Jeff Madison was involved in it too. We built some stuff that we'd never built before. We created some solutions that we'd never used before, at least in a recording studio. There was a shitload of glass, so that always makes it fun, when there's just way too many windows. And it's just a striking looking place. And Mark did a wonderful job executing it. And Matt Marinelli did a amazing job sifting through the ridiculous laundry list of wants from a semi-crazy customer who had the money to do whatever the hell he wanted. So, sometimes that not having a money limit thing can actually be a bit of a problem, because those kind of guys don't have to stop. So they can, a project can become a forever hobby to them. We all as professionals need to start, work on, and finish projects. Otherwise we get lost and we never move on to the next project. So that project had the potential to do that, but somehow we managed to wrap it up, guys.
Yeah, I forgot about all the problems. I just
in the end was
it's still right. Oh my God, it was an nightmare.
in the end was the client happy?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
So that's what really matters.
Was it residential or commercial?
it's private. It's in a commercial space, but it's private,
Yeah.
private use.
And it was,
Beautiful console. Really nice console.
Yeah, at what point in the project does the equipment come into play? Like, had that person already had a concept of what the gear was
Oh,
gonna be?
yeah.
He
He
had already
purchased-
purchased the console. Fran, did he purchase the console before you were even involved?
Yes, he had purchased the console when we first made contact.
Yep.
Then we spent a year looking for space, a year.
Yep.
Was it a vintage console?
Yes.
Yeah, it's the 8068 that used to be in Stratosphere is
Wow.
the console that he owns, which we rebuilt before it went into 2 different versions of Stratosphere, and then rebuilt again because enough time had gone by for this client. So that there's like a 25-year history
And
with that
when you
console
say-
at this point.
rebuilt twice, I mean, is that just recapping or you?
So yeah, I mean, yes and no. Then when so Stratosphere at 2 locations, they originally were on kind of 14th Street and Meatpacking, and there was a fire in that building, not in their space, but they had to move, and that's when they put together the new space. But they, in the period of time while they were building the space and designing it with Fran, myself and Dan Zellman did a series of mods. The console had just been recapped at their old space, but we, ultrasonically cleaned, did a whole bunch of pretty extensive mods. And then, it was at Stratosphere for, I guess, 12 years once it was installed. So, but when we pulled it out of there, we did another recap, cleaned it again, did a couple changes to a few mods.
Why was it necessary to do a second recap in such a short
It
period?
needed it after 12 years. I mean, lifespan on caps is anywhere from 10 to, on the outside, maybe 20 years. Those consoles run pretty warm. It needed it. And also the client didn't want to be looking at a recap, 5 years after the board was installed. I mean, why pull your
And this wasn't an issue.
Yeah, if you're going to spend the money today versus 5 years from now, sometimes you're better spend. I mean, it's probably
Yeah,
cheaper to do
upfront.
today than 5 years from now. So, but yeah, I mean, I think it was the right move. And just to once you're up and running, you're not looking at downtime. But that's a special board. I really love that board. And obviously, while it was at Stratosphere made a ton of great music. So,
And were speakers in the equation early as well, like soffitted speakers? Were
He
they?
ended up purchasing some Griffin monitors because we took his engineer around to a couple of places, and Matt and I both were positively recommending them. It was a good fit for the room. It was a really good fit for the room. Look, we don't hard sell anybody on the speakers. A lot of people come to us and say we're using ATC, we're using PMC, whatever it may be. I'm not a you got to use my speakers or else I'm not doing your studio kind of guy. I let the speakers sell themselves. So if you're looking for speakers and you'd like to come hear some, I'd be happy to play them for you. That's kind of my sell on the speakers.
They soffitted at the studio?
Sorry?
Are they soffitted at the studios, or are they just free?
No, they're soffitted. They're in wall. They're a model
Wall
between between the size of the 2 ones that you see here. You're seeing an 18-inch 3-way and an 8-inch 2-way. We also make a 15-inch 3-way. So they're kind of in between those 2.
And the client has to make that decision early, because as we've seen, if you switch up your monitoring intentions, it can completely throw a wrench in the design, especially as it's nearing completion.
Yeah.
Do you guys have any, as producers, John and I, engineers, producers, musicians, we have people we aspire to, who we've learned from and who we have sort of built a philosophy on, or used what we've learned from them. Do you guys have people that you kind of admired coming up, or was it in college that you got your experience, or actually building studios?
Who wants to go first?
I'll take a crack at it. So when I was a kid, I was a huge architecture fan and loved Frank Lloyd Wright, his homes and buildings, and most of his later work. And a lot of his homes that he designed, he would do everything. And he would do, furniture. So it would be the home and a lot of the things that are in the house, furniture, things like that. And so when I started building rooms, that kind of became that's kind of how I started anyway. With like the private rooms that I would build, we'd do everything. We would do the construction, all the acoustics, and we would also do all the millwork and all of the, you know, custom studio furniture. So, you know, I guess he's an outside of the music industry reference, but that was definitely
Interesting.
an influence on me.
Interesting. Okay.
For me,
Anybody else?
Who else?
well, construction-wise, I started with British Rail Engineering, full apprenticeship, carpentry, what have you. Shifted to New York in '82. No green card, so you got to do something. So I went into construction, and first job I ever did was a recording studio for a place called Center for Media Arts.
Oh, yeah.
Eventually opened my own business, high-end residential. Got nipped in the bud at Kate Lehman's house from Lehman Brothers when it crashed. Lost a lot, everything gone. And I ran into a gentleman called Chris Harmony. They built the studios for years, asked me to come on board with him. Learned a ton from Chris. Built many studios with him. Moved on recently to a company called DDCG. And I just love it. It's just a great field. I've been in it for a long time. Work with Frans. If you can follow the drawings and you know what you're doing, it's going to be a beautiful job. That's all I can say.
I mean, look, I didn't go to school for what I do. I went to school for, well, hell, I went to school for marine biology first. And then I changed to music. And I got involved in music engineering, and I thought I was going to be a recording engineer. So the beginning of my career is a recording engineer's career. And then it became clear that to have steady work, a technician's job was a more steady job. And I had some electronics background, so I got into technical work in studios. And I worked for 10 years as chief engineer at Skyline Studios in Manhattan. And during that time, the studio grew quite a bit. It grew from 1 room to 3 rooms. So I was exposed to studio design. The owner was doing the design, but you know, I was chief engineer. I was helping him, and you know, we just gotten hands-on a lot of studio construction, and I thought it was fascinating. I thought it was really interesting, and one thing led to another, and a couple of clients actually asked me, you know, Skyline's clients actually asked me if I would not mind helping them build studios. And then all of a sudden I built a studio that started to compete with Skyline, and that got a little weird. And so I, you know, after 10 years there, it was around 1992, I broke out and started doing this full time. But I don't have an architectural background. I'm self-taught.
Who built that room originally?
Sorry?
Built the room originally.
At Skyline?
Who was the architect who built it?
It was designed by the owner, Paul Wycliffe.
Ah, because
And the
that's
builders were a bunch of Irish guys we hired off the street.
What was the room you designed? What was the room you designed that you that competed with Skyline?
East Hill.
Oh, nice.
That was my first commercial studio, if you will. I'd done a couple of private ones. And then right after that, David Cole and Robert Clavillis asked me if I would design studio for CNC Music Factory. And that's when I realized that, look, I have to make a decision here. Am I gonna, because they were big time clients of Skylines. And if I'm gonna design a studio for them, it's obvious they're not gonna be clients anymore. So I went and talked to the bosses. I said, look, guys, I really dug it here. I had a great run. I wouldn't change a thing, but I think I'm gonna, you know, break out and start doing this. They understood, you know, we parted on completely good terms, and still friends with Paul Wycliffe to this day.
still there and still sounds great.
Sorry?
Reservoir.
Really get a power cord. Sorry.
Reservoir. Still there.
Oh yeah, Reservoir, yeah, 3rd floor is still there, yeah. That was the original studio, yeah. Yep.
Yeah, that's a great sounding room.
Yep.
Yeah, Paul did a good job on it originally, and nobody's managed to fuck it up yet, so there you go.
Fran, that's interesting. I actually have a similar, the way that I got into building rooms was I was a tech for a long time at Apogee. And then when I moved to New York, I started at Avatar, and I was a staff engineer there for years. But as an intern, I helped Roy and Vinny, who was one of the staff construction guys. I helped build Studio G, which was the mix room on the 3rd floor.
Yep.
So for 3 months during my internship, because I come from a family of builders, so I helped gut that room and turn it over into, what it became. And then I coincidentally worked in that room for about 2.5 years with Rich Costi assisting him. And then when I left Avatar, I sort of, built a room for a studio for myself when I was doing freelance. And then, it just became, people would come over, they saw the room, and then, built rooms for friends. And then
One
that
thing leads to another, right?
thing led to another. And we know how, record budgets were becoming in the mid-aughts. And for me, it was very clear. I love building and designing. And then, this thing just really snowballed. So I kind of made the decision to formalize it. And yeah, I love it.
Greg, tell us about how you got to where you are. It's a similar path.
Similar to Fran, yeah. I went to school for the engineering aspect of it and saw myself being the guy behind the console turning the knobs. But I always liked being in the rooms and what they gave to the artists in terms of inspiration and all that. So I started looking into how I could be a part of the building process. And one of my faculty members at college hooked me up with Fran for an internship. I did that. That was 7 years ago now, 8 years ago. I went off. I worked doing just some consulting for a while, but stayed in touch. And thankfully, I'm back doing studios.
Excellent.
Hey, Fran, did you, just out of curiosity, were you involved in Demena?
Yeah. Yeah, we did the redesign over at Demena.
Yeah, and Manhattan Center as well?
Correct. The Studio 7 at Manhattan Center, the one attached to the ballroom, I've done twice now.
Yeah. Both those rooms.
The log cabin I didn't design, but they have Griffin speakers in the log cabin.
Yeah, right. Both those, the 7 and Demena, I've worked quite a bit in. And I've been thinking about those rooms because those are orchestral rooms, basically.
Right.
And, I'm like, our orchestra is going to come back playing in the same fashion. Our trumpet player is going to be spitting into their valves open into the, it's just the thought of how those rooms might have to, the live part of those rooms might have to change a little bit.
Well, not until the live business figures out how to come back will we be grappling with how to record an orchestra, I fear. I don't know.
Hey, Fran, shameful plug, the Manhattan Center. I did with Dennis that it got voted. We got voted best recording studio builder, US GC Industry magazine for that room.
Kidding. I didn't know that.
Yeah, no, it's just recent. So shameless plug. Sorry.
Excellent.
Stuart, how about plexiglass around music stands? Like they do in bodegas.
We put a big body condom on every musician.
We all know how good plexiglass sounds when you get it real close to microphones on multiple planes.
Oh yeah, that'll be great.
Especially like a nice parabolic. That would
Exactly.
You say a parabolics?
be, yeah.
Are there any other questions from anybody, Stuart, or are we stumbling along on our own?
I heard a question. James sent me a question about what's everybody's favorite room they've worked in or worked on.
I think we talked about that project downtown. What else do we want to talk about?
My answer to both forms of that question is actually the same. Both worked on and worked in would be Guilford Sound in Vermont.
Yeah.
That's Fran and I have worked together on a bunch of projects, and I've worked on a lot, outside of working with Fran, and some really fantastic clients and great rooms. But Guilford Sound is hands down my favorite, both as an engineer and producer. It's just a great room to make a record in. And
Tell us why.
well, I think for two reasons. One is, I work in the city a lot, and Guilford's in southern Vermont. It's rural. There's not a lot of distractions. Man, I swear we get twice as much work done. It's hard to get everybody up there, and scheduling is always a nightmare. All the things.
Is it residential?
it's a residential studio. They have a separate building with 5 en suites basically.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, it's a really nice location. It's on a big rural property. It really allows you to focus and keep people focused. Cooking for yourself, all that kind of stuff. If you want, like, it just becomes a bit of a family atmosphere, which is very nice. I did a record over at Thanksgiving there a couple of years ago, where people brought their families on Thanksgiving Day, and we all did a gigantic. I mean, really kind of special moments, but. As a design and as a facility, it's also just, it's an amazing sounding live room, great isolation spaces, roomy control room, you don't really need to bring any equipment. I mean,
He's got everything.
Dave pretty much, the owner is Dave Snyder, and he's pretty much got you covered. I'm a gearaholic, and I end up dragging a few things up just, because I can't help myself, but you don't have to. I mean, everything's there. It's just a really, relaxing, fun, creative environment to work in.
That project would have to be on the top of my list as well. And coincidentally, Dave Snyder would love to have been able to join us today. I invited him, but he unfortunately had another commitment today. So I was hoping we'd have the studio owners or customers or clients viewpoint, but Dave couldn't join us. But yeah, that would be right at the top of my list. I'd have to go, the other two that I'd put at the top of my list, just because of the scope and the amount of visibility they have, would be the studio at the Palms and Sterling Sound in New York City. Those were 2 projects that I can only be super, super proud of. And I think they both came out great. So Sterling Sound is unfortunately gone. They have moved on. But it was kind of a pivotal moment in my career to do that project, because it was, I wasn't at the level that we are at now, and there was, a bit of trust building required, and I was able to build that, and able to come through with what those guys were looking for. In my opinion, the guys with the best ears in the business, and able to make them happy. So that was really, really a big thing for me, and a pivotal point for us. And they really looked and sounded great. So
our other Vermont studio should be at the top of that list too this year.
Should be. We just won a tech award for it.
Yeah, I haven't worked in there, but worked on it obviously, and that's a great room.
Yeah, we're kind of like the studio designers of Vermont now. I think it's.
You guys are talking about, is it the Mill? Is that the name of it?
Yeah, Old Mill. Yeah.
Back to the Sterling space. I was in the space before you started working in there, when it was just an open space, and it just looked like such a huge. It looked like the size of a football field or so. You know what I mean? Of just
space.
Yeah, and I was just like, Greg, well, how the fuck are you? What are you gonna do? And then to be in there after, when it was finished, and go up and work with Greg or George Marino or Ted. It was the way every room was laid out was really great. It was just like, it was such a welcoming place to be in, even if you were just waiting in the lobby or the kitchen.
Yep.
Like we used to go up on Fridays. Like I used to go up when my wife worked there, I'd go up Friday, like 6 o'clock, and just hang out for an hour with her. And it was just so great. It was such
a great place to hang, no doubt.
Hey, Fran, how did the concept for being able to walk around the facility, like say the back of Greg's room, where you still had the windows and there was a walkway?
Yeah. So it's pretty simple how that came to pass. The guys decided early on that they wanted to have windows in their rooms to the outside world. So we talked about, what that meant acoustically and how we would deal with it, because a lot of them didn't have any windows in their rooms. And I said, look, it's not a problem. We just have to be careful. We have to be mindful of what we're doing. And then we started looking at laying out the plan, and a lot of things dictate a layout when you're looking at an empty space. There's structural columns, there's other limitations, right? So the structural columns kind of dictated where we would put a block of space. And then as we started to twist the rooms around in there, it became very difficult, if not impossible, to line up the center of the front of the room with an exterior window. So we, played with this back and forth. And what's it going to look like if there's a mullion going down the middle of the window? Blah 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 blah. And I got to tell you, I think a lot of it was Chris Muth's idea. He said, "Look, guys, we need a back of house way to get around the facility anyway. Wouldn't it be great if we had a way to circulate around the facility that was not open to the public? And we create a hallway back there. We use it to manage all the wiring between everything. We use it to move gear around. We can even put, access to machine spaces back there. And then we don't have to line up with the windows. And it was like, doing brilliant. So we just created a 5-foot hallway that wrapped all the way around the outside perimeter. You might look at it as a waste of space, but I tell you, in reality, it solves so many problems. And
Yeah.
as soon as everybody was able to visualize it, the light bulb went off for everybody. Went, yes, that's what we need to do here. So that's how that came about.
Really great. And so the percentage of you guys, you do mastering rooms and recording studios as well as educational, anything that involves an audio need.
Recording, mastering, post, TV, broadcast, educational, theaters, it's whatever has an acoustic need. But traditionally we've been primarily recording and recording and mastering. But I'd say in the past 10 years, 90% of my business has been post-production and educational. And I think that's just where the recording business is headed. It's who's building big music recording studios? Just not that many of them. So the private studios that we do, there's a small percentage of the overall percentage of our work that's high-end private studios, but most of them are small. Most of them are single room, small studios. So when you get into, if you want to look at just the numbers, it's 90% educational and post-production, because post-production is a constant. It's always there. They're always improving. They're always upgrading to the next Dolby standard. They're always doing something.
What's everyone's thought about this Atmos? Are you building Atmos
Love
room?
it. Just love it. For the reason I just said.
Well,
Everybody's
beyond
got
the
to upgrade.
economics of it, what besides mixing for theater events and stuff, do you think it'll ever get to a place at home? Do you think there'll be some kind of
I think it's out of our hands. I think that here's what I know. I'll tell you what I know. I know that a couple of major labels have embraced it very aggressively and are aggressively remixing catalog worth of material in Dolby Atmos for music. What does it mean? Well, the marketing hype says that you'll be able to enjoy Dolby Atmos for music on everything from earbuds to your cell phone speaker to a sound bar to stereo to home theater to full immersive. So I guess one of the really smart things about the technology is the scalability. In implementation and practical implementation, I don't have enough experience with all those other alternative playback formats to give you any kind of I wonder if anybody on the forum does have what does Atmos sound when it's down mixed for a sound bar? I don't know.
Well, but that's interesting. First of all, I find it quite refreshing to even have that technology available, because when I've mixed for surround, I definitely approached it quite different than anything I've ever heard, meaning depending on how I want to mix the record, sometimes I want to say, do I want to be standing in the middle of the sound stage of the band is one way I like to mix. So then those speakers behind you might be singers singing.
Yeah, they might be full range front material or not.
Right, exactly. Whatever it might be, depending on how you want to pull it off. And on my live situations, I really take good care in what that down mix sounds like. That's what I've done it for stereo with, I make my critical balances listening to a mono speaker. So that is in the old days about 6 feet away. Now it's about 20 feet away from me. Literally make those important decisions listening to a little tiny mono speaker. And I do the same thing with a surround situation. So when I build a mix, I'll sit there and not only collapse it to stereo, but also what does that stereo sound in mono? And that's the definitive approach. You know, been doing it forever. But what's kind of cool about it is not loading up certain effects and stuff on the same speaker. So let's say, for an example, I'm doing a reggae band and I have a guitarist on the left front speaker. His delay is going to be on the back right speaker. So in mono, that sounds incredible. Where, you know, when it's anywhere else, it changes, you know. So the idea is mono compatibility, even on a surround situation, I think is paramount in the final mix. Because not everybody, like you said, is going to either have a surround situation, or how is that going to translate to that, you know, that
I mean,
little
look,
bar.
as far as the labels are concerned, it comes down to economics. Can they sell you the same music again? That's what
Yeah.
it comes down to.
Well, Beatles are great at that, right?
You know, I mean, can we sell you this thing again? And then you got to look at what's the delivery method, because there is no hardware delivery. It's all streaming right now, or you go to a theater. So, you know, the streaming services that step up and somehow figure out how to make this experience immersive and enjoyable. I don't know, you know, Azevedo and Marinelli, I'm curious if you guys have any experience and or thoughts on this. I know Matt Azevedo works in other applications of immersive environments quite a bit.
Yeah, my research focus and a lot of the, I mean, you know, a lot, you know, right now especially, a lot of my time is spent on acoustic simulation research, and all the acoustic simulation work I do and all the virtual acoustic stuff I work on is it's built around combinations of spatialization techniques like ambisonics and vector-based amplitude banding, VBAP. There's this really huge academic side to approaching spatial audio, both in the kind of scientific analysis end of things and both the artistic stuff. And there's so many resources out there that personally I think are much more compelling tool sets than Atmos, and offer opportunities for spatial design that by nature not dependent on the playback array of speakers. And when in terms of projects that I've worked on recently that I'm really excited about, we just had a studio go online at Rhode Island School of Design, a sound art studio with a 25.4 channel hemispherical speaker array built for fourth order ambisonic playback. And, you know, to sit in that kind of a space and hear stuff that's built with these spatialization techniques presented on a really beautiful array in a good room, it's a wonderful thing. But the great thing about ambisonics is you can then take that and directly fold it down to binaural, to quad, to stereo, to whatever your need is. So I think there's, you know, when I look at the stuff that people are doing, you know, in the kind of more academic circles that I tend to be in for this kind of stuff, there's a lot of really wonderful things happening, and a lot of, you know, fantastic tools that are, you know, because they're built around open formats, are very accessible if you want to get into them. And, you know, like I did a webcast concert where I was doing spatialization in a virtual room of modular synthesizer stuff that then, you know, was all built in third order ambisonics locally and then folded down to binaural for streaming. So, you know, there's a lot of really wonderful things going on in this kind of stuff. I don't know at what point consumers get excited about it. You know, like DVD audio was going to save the music industry. And, you know, and now apparently, you know, a little trash can speaker you talk to is going to save the music industry. And I have a hard time seeing how this ends up being commercialized successfully.
Yeah,
But in
well,
terms of the available technologies, you know, there's some really, really wonderful tool sets out there for doing experimental stuff in space, and for doing, you know, really, really convincing, immersive, you know, sound environments that are then, you know, you can build it once, and then because the speakers all happen on the decoder side, once you've built that sound field, presenting it on, you know, the arbitrary system you might get stuck with on playback is just an issue of building a decoder for that room, and then, you know, your multi-channel source plays back as you expect it to.
So look, when you compare something like ambisonics, which is a more open format than the big company's format, but we're talking about the same thing. We're talking about playback system independent vector-based placement
Sure.
of objects.
Yeah.
So they're supposed to both work that way. I just don't have enough personal experience with somebody who's created an object-based mix in whatever format, and how that really does, you know, fold down. That's where my experience falls.
Yeah.
apart.
Well, I think that you know, the difference between, you know, an object-based system like Atmos or VBAB, you know, vector panning, which, you know, Atmos is basically, you know, a branded flavor of VBAB.
Mm-hmm.
And something like ambisonics, ambisonics isn't object-based. You know, ambisonics is an encoding method for a sound field.
Right.
And because of the way the ambisonic orders fold down naturally, I really like the way I can print something as an ambisonic signal, and then by selecting the playback order and the decoder parameters, get it to work as well as possible in a given playback environment.
Yeah, and I stand corrected. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Ambisonics is not a vector-based mixing program, and it's, correct me if I'm wrong, it's limited to what you capture with an ambisonics transducer of some kind, correct?
Well, you know, I mean, if you want to record stuff, I mean, you can go out with you know, an ambisonic microphone and record ambisonics, and you're done. But there's also, you can pan things into, you know, you can have an ambisonic panning. You know, there are panners, there are, you know, tools to encode any kind of signal, including mono sources, and then, you know, vector pan them like an object-based system. But what comes out of it is, instead of it being a bunch of discrete tracks that you then have to pan across your speakers on playback, what comes out is an encoding of a spherical sound field that has everything in it. So where, you know, vector panning type things are discrete sources at discrete points in space, ambisonics is the totality of every point in space at every time.
I got you.
Yeah. I'm gonna try and not monopolize the discussion on my.
No, it's fascinating.
But wasn't Robert Margouleff an early adapter to ambisonics? Because I remember decades ago him playing around with it and talking about it and all that.
I mean, it's been around since the 70s.
Yeah.
I think now that it's, you know, there's some real limitations to how crisp the image can be with that kind of early, you know, first order ambisonics kind of thing. But you know, we did a great tour of an organ facility, you know, this very strange privately built organ concert hall that was put up by a 1920s robber baron in Medford, Massachusetts. And I went in, and you know when we were there, I did some third order ambisonic recordings of the space, and playing back those recordings just straight, no processing, on a speaker dome. It's transformational. You know, you're hearing space captured that way, and then being able to it's like having, a zillion microphones but it just kind of, it just happens, space is captured and then space is reproduced.
But is a lot of that hardware dependent on playback? Or, because years ago I had a friend who worked at a company called Lake Audio, who was, they're bought by Dolby, I believe.
Right.
They were doing the, like surround sound in headphones, where the ping pong ball would bounce all the way. You're wearing headphones in a stereo
Mhm.
mix through phasing and things like that.
Yep.
So
Sony's doing it again, by the way.
So okay, so is that sort of what, like when you fold down what you're talking about, this hall that you captured, can that fold down to stereo, and through phase manipulation and playback, can you have some sort of 3D sound space?
Well, I think to binaural stereo, sure. I mean, you can take head-related transfer functions and convolve the ambisonic sound field with the right HRTFs, and you get the full immersive spatial environment on headphones. If you're playing back on, front stereo speakers, you're getting front stereo speakers, and there's ways you can decode it that you don't lose parts of the sound field. But if you've only got, one speaker in the room, I mean, I know there's people who I've seen plenty of marketing materials that swear up and down you can get surround sound out of your, little Amazon, ask me to play songs for you speaker, your CIA microphone you put in your house to tell them everything you're listening to. But, I have not heard believable spatial audio out of a single point speaker yet.
Agreed.
But there's a
Well-
lot, Atmos certainly works, but there's a lot of really interesting ways you can.
Have you checked out Sound One? Because they're doing that, Matthew. Single point source speaker, and you get this spatial effect. It's pretty remarkable stuff.
I haven't heard that, Steve.
I mean, given my research habits, spatial effects just kind of give me like this creepy feeling up the back of I don't want a spatial effect. I want space.
Yeah, that's the struggle for Atmos, is are they going to be able to incentivize somebody who doesn't have an immersive playback system to buy that product again? Like, Frans,
Exactly.
if you're listening in stereo, are they going to be able to sell you Atmos?
I mean, I think the real question is that really the market that's critical for them, in any way? In other words, if anything, we've seen personal audio playback, degraded over the last few decades from, somebody's 70s Pioneer system is arguably better than what most people have in their house for typical playback. I mean, half the people I know listen to playback on their laptop,
Yeah.
But I would say there's newer markets that didn't exist. Obviously AR, VR audio is, a whole new field comparatively. And I think that there's a relatively untapped field of, live venue and basically theatrical playback of music is really not it's not a market that's strong outside of certain, small spheres right now. In other words, I think in a day and age where a lot of people are looking for experiences outside of the entertainment they can easily achieve at home, with Netflix and streaming services and all the content that's, force fed to you all the time, not that we don't participate willingly. I think there's some really interesting applications for audio where, you do go experience something in an environment that's not your typical concert. I mean, I'm occasionally a touring musician, and I love, your traditional, rock show, for lack of a better description. But I mean, I mix front of house too. We're mixing 99% in mono in, 2020. We have way more tools at our disposal. It sounds way better, but there are some really interesting things that could be done, with immersive sound in that environment that's relatively controlled. I mean, people are certainly capable of building those systems on the fly. I mean, I've seen guys build gigantic productions where, adding additional speakers for immersive wouldn't wouldn't phase them at all.
Sure.
So I'm kind of interested to see where that goes. As far as like people buying a whole new format to play back in their home on a whole new system, people aren't buying music to play back in their home right now.
No, nobody's
So
buying
the
a new
streaming
system.
services don't want to provide those formats and the extra bandwidth that would be required. I don't necessarily see that as being a viable market.
But here's my observation on that. It's interesting. I think that the reason that these couple of major labels have embraced this is because they don't want to make the mistake they made with DVD-A and SACD, which was, here is two, well, the fact that there were two competing formats was a Betamax, VHS problem, but here's these two viable formats for a new way to listen to music. But we're gonna dribble out this really paltry selection of content. And if you weren't listening to classical music, you had a very, very limited, first couple of years, very, very limited access to program to listen to. So I think they're trying to avoid that by re-encoding their whole catalogs or major portions of their catalogs in Atmos for Music, whatever that means today. And they're using, qualified surround mixers, guys we know, to do this work. What they're going to do with it, how are they going to sell it?
They're trying to make it more accessible with the Atmos enabled loudspeakers that you plop on top of your surround channels and it bounces sound off the ceiling.
Sure.
But that just makes it more complicated in terms of the setup. If at least with discrete devices, you put them here, you're good to go. But with this ceiling in here, I couldn't use an Atmos enabled speaker, but the layman wouldn't know that, and they'll put it up and it'll be completely not as intended. But
Greg, I got a definitive response to that. So why not turn this surround entertainment situation into, really you have to hire a utility company like you do with electric and gas. You're not going to sit there and start, plumbing your own gas lines. So you hire, through the manufacturer, a licensed, utility engineers.
Steve, I love it, but we can't get them to buy the damn music. They're not going to pay for us to come
Right.
put in a
So,
system.
but imagine though that it's maybe somehow included or something's going on, that a professional comes in, evaluates your space, and whether they come in to do it or they tell you where to put the speakers, that's how it's addressed. So, mom and dad don't stack the fronts in the back and the back in the front, and all that kind of stuff. Imagine if there was some kind of utility service like Con Ed showing up, or Verizon. You're not installing your own phone system.
I mean, we're at a point where like 30% of the country can't pay rent. So I mean, the idea that we're going to have people coming in to.
I forgot.
I forgot.
Hey guys, so this is awesome, and I know we can go on for hours, but I just got a question, which this could take 24 hours to answer.
Can I just say really quick, Stuart? I hate to interrupt, but I've got to go back to work because
Oh, Johnny, because
I got to finish. Thank you guys so much.
we love you.
It
Thanks,
was
John.
a pleasure.
Hey, John,
Pleasure meeting all of
Good to
you.
meet you, John.
Yeah, and thanks. And I'll watch this later on just to see what
What the 24-hour question was?
24-hour question.
Thanks, John.
Okay, thanks, buddy. So here's the question. What can go wrong when working on a project?
Oh, wow.
Oh, come on.
Well, that RISD studio I mentioned in the schematic design drawings, the studio was next to the sound art studio was next to a painting studio, and we thought that was pretty good. And then around 50% construction documents, they changed the program to having the room next to it being an architectural model shop. And then we're going to put drill presses and table saws in the room directly next to our 25.4 channel sound art studio. So that was a thrilling upgrade to the planned sound isolation. And there's some extra doors got added, and some buffer spaces got reinforced a little bit. And at the end of it, we were oh, and then they the shaft where they were going to drop down the main air duct, which in the drawings for this building, the building it was being put into is 100-year-old building. We did the demolition and looked up the shaft, and there were dozens of utility and water and gas lines that had been strung across the shaft over the last 100 years and never documented. So, and the first week of construction, we had to redesign the entire ventilation system around the fact that we couldn't actually get a duct up to the roof.
Yikes.
But it worked out. It worked out. But I mean, you can. There's a lot of space between the 100% construction documents and the first day of the build.
What was your solution on the high vac? How did you address that?
So now the rooftop unit is no longer on the roof and is hung between some structural beams up in the ceiling of the architecture studio. The architect was really committed to their, yes, got a cat down here. It's not dinner time yet, sweetie. The architect was really committed to the aesthetic of having this wide open ceiling plane. So there's just this giant ventilator with multiple layers of sealed up mass loaded vinyl with padded duct, mass loaded duct wrap, mummifying this couple of ton rooftop unit that's just exposed in the right in the middle of a classroom.
Wow.
How does the heat exchange happen if it's inside?
Well, we could get some pipes out to some stuff.
Oh, okay. Water chilled unit?
Yeah. So it's a water system. So the water gets in and out just fine, but the air comes in instead of from a rooftop duct. The fresh air comes in through a hole in the wall on the far side of the project, and then there's this big honking rooftop unit that's just exposed in a classroom, and we got it down to NC 35, and everyone's is happy with it. But there was some it was scary for a while. There was some very, very scary moments in that design process.
So how long did it take from the moment you figured out, oh, this ain't gonna work, to the solution?
Well, the build was, I don't know, 6 months of the construction process.
But I'm assuming everything was held up until that.
No, because they had to get the classroom online for first day classes in the fall. So we just kept, so the engine, I don't want to get too deep into the project management and the contract details or something like this, but I mean, when you think the design's done and all of a sudden you have to redesign a major component of the thing, and the institution's not especially interested in increasing their fee that they've agreed to for it. It was a lot of stuff, and I mean, and then the noise issues weren't totally settled until halfway through the semester. I mean, we got the room open and running, but we had stuff happen, like one of the VAV, one of the fan boxes downstream. I mean, thankfully not in the studio, but in the classroom space, came from the factory with the fan wired backwards. And so the guys came in to balance the HVAC with a fan pushing 500 CFM back up the pipe. And so what they did, they just cranked up
some other fan.
Yeah, they just cranked up the main unit until it was pushing 300 CFM past this fan, and then dampered everything else down to make the balancing work. And And that first day, it was like, you know, NC 60 something in the classroom. So we got it down to like, you know, NC 45 before classes started. So it wasn't the worst thing. And then we got another 10 points off of it by the end of it. But I mean, it was some really fast engineering. Like, you know, the mechanical engineer and the Centec were all putting in overtime to make this happen in a.
I can visualize the mummified air conditioning unit that you describe. I can see it, you know.
You know, it's a lovely kind of beige color, you know, and but yeah, IAC duct wrap. So you know, IAC makes some really good products for you know, making noisy things less noisy, and we use them extensively.
So,
You know, when somebody asks that question, the bigger question, what can go wrong? To me, the interesting thing about any scenario of what can go wrong is the trickle down of what happens from what went wrong. So a project that a few of us were involved with, there was nobody on this screen was responsible for surveying a site that we were building a studio in. And so we completed the design, trusting the aforementioned party to have done an accurate survey, and had construction drawings on the table. One of our friends who's here was getting ready to build that studio. And, you know, one of the first things we had to do was actually build a new structural floor, because the building was a little rickety and we were going to build some floated studios on top of a new floor. So, you know, there's a structural steel guy in there. We're talking about building a structural floor. And this was all predicated on basically, what's the right word here? Reinforcing an existing floor. And nobody bothered to really check that the floor was somewhat level from one side of the building to the other. It's New York. We don't expect floors to be level. We expect them to be out. But this particular floor was out about 8 inches from one end of the building to the other. And it's not a big building. This is a small building. So needless to say, that was way too much for the design solution to accommodate, you know, with fudging things around. So much like Matt just described, the scramble begins, right? It's like well, how did this happen? Well, who cares? What are we doing now? The question isn't how did this happen? The question is, what are we doing now? We'll talk about how did this happen later. And you know, everybody comes out. This guy comes down, structural engineer comes down, structural steel contractors there, general contractors there, we're there, architects there, everybody's there. And well, what are we going to do? Well, I don't know, because all the customer cares about is, what is it going to cost me and how long is it going to hold up my project? So universal 2 bottom line answers are, what is it going to cost me and how long is this going to delay things? It's a really great way to start off a project too, when you're like, you know, just mobilizing and everybody's getting going, and we've been getting ready for months to get going, and there's structural steel on site and everybody's gangbusters gung-ho about moving forward, and we can't put anything in yet.
Is it possible, as a project, is everything fixable? Have you ever run across a situation where you went, it can't be fixed, even if there's money?
Anything's possible, it just costs money.
It just costs money, right?
Well, I mean, if Fran, not to jump in, but I mean, I think you know, what you and Matt are both talking about is, at the end of the day, your design team, your GC, everybody, they're problem solvers. So everything's fixable and nothing's fixable, because everything is a set of compromises that you're agreeing to based on what your design criteria is. So, you know, I'm sure a client could have a pie in the sky demand that the space doesn't, you know, allow for. And that's where being a reasonable client who can prioritize what's most important in your project, and then give you the resources you need to pull off, you know, the top 3 or 4.
Well, I mean, Matt, let's say that you've got a train track running 20 yards from your studio and you want to build a studio there and there's an active train track. I'm going to tell you, don't put a studio
Absolutely.
there. I'm going to try very hard to talk you out of putting a studio there. But we all know that people have done just that. Decided to build studios 25 yards from an active train track.
Yep.
And, you know, anything is possible. It's just a matter of how much money can you throw at it, and how much smaller can you get the studio?
Sure.
Or, you know,
Exit from the Holland Tunnel, friend.
or the exit from the Holland.
We actually, it's funny, I actually did, I spoke to you about this years ago, but I did a survey for a client about a prospective space that they wanted to put a studio into. And literally my advice was, the train is running directly under your space, and it's a busy train. Like, pick another site, which I think is probably, if you have the option in building a studio project, I think, Fran, you may feel differently, but I think the smoothest projects I've been involved in, the design team is involved even before the site is chosen often, because it's way easier to pick a site that lends itself to building a studio than deal with a set of problems in a site that you just shouldn't be building a studio in.
It's the single biggest decision you will make in any technical construction project, in my opinion, is location.
Yep.
It's if you've got a good venue, you will save yourself tons of money, tons of time, and triple tons of aggravation. That's just, it's over and over again proven itself. So
at what point would you go in, like, I know you guys work in New York a lot, and like, do you go in and check for RF before you start building? Like in Midtown Manhattan, you're near the Empire State Building.
there's no RF on the Empire State Building anymore.
I think realistically speaking, you just know if you're in a metropolitan area that it's going to be a problem. And even if you test it on day one of surveying a site, 2 years later, when you're actually potentially done with the project, or 18 months, what wasn't an issue on day one might be an issue. We had a studio on the West End of Manhattan where there wasn't, a RF problem we would have measured early in the project, but by the time the studio actually opened, they had a whole number of problems, including a taxi cab dispatch office adjacent to the studio. So, I mean, there's not a lot of solutions for RF, affordable solutions in a place like New York. So I think you just, as a studio owner and an engineer, you expect that you're going to be dealing with some of that stuff if you're building a studio in that kind of environment.
It's funny. I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, but it seems to me that back in the 80s and early 90s, we just had to deal with it a lot more. I don't know if the gear's gotten better, if RF isolation's I don't know if the FCC has gotten stricter. I don't know what, but
people are using less Stratocasters now, and more.
But I mean, look, if you're going to put a single coil pickup near, you're going to get RF. If you're going to deal with unbalanced gear, every once in a while you're going to deal with RF. But very rarely, even in New York City, do we run into a problem that isn't, something silly with the ground or something that can't be fixed. I don't know if you agree with me or not.
We had issues with cell towers, Fred. Remember that for Charles? They wrote the FCC, which was remarkable.
Yep. The FCC actually came to one of my clients' studios because he complained about RF from that was new, and he could see that a new cell phone antenna had been put up, within a block of him, and they came. They sent a guy, and the guy came with a field strength meter, and he measured the RF. He actually found out who the owner of the tower was, had them shut it down, measured the delta, told them that they were in compliance, and basically said, tough shit, I can't do anything for you. But they wanted to know if that antenna wasn't in compliance. So in other words, if that antenna was putting out too many watts or whatever it was, they wanted to know. And it was one particular piece of equipment at that studio. It was one pair of speakers, powered speakers that were just picking up RF.
We've been talking mostly about design challenges and coordination problems, but what happens after all that are the execution problems. So, I mean, when you have a Mark or a Jim building your studio, we run into that a lot less because they've done it and they know exactly how we want it done. And even though it's all in the drawings, you get into some of these bigger projects where maybe the studios are just a small part of a larger overall scope, and it's hard to explain to the sprinkler guy why he shouldn't be using a 6-inch hole saw throughout the whole project. So it's often comes down to communication between the GC and the subs on these large projects.
Good point.
I knew we could talk about this for 24 hours. You guys have a lot of experience, and I would imagine every project has issues, right? Would you say every project does, and you just work it out?
Sure, to varying degrees.
Absolutely.
You know, it's a very rare thing where you can undertake any endeavor that's going to run multiple months or multiple years and involve multiple parties and not have there be some kind of a, you know, something that got missed, or an oversight, or a conflict, or a we saw things differently. You know, before you even get to the bringing materials to the job site, you've got to deal with a, you know, a bureaucracy to get permission to do your project. And the bureaucracy has its own viewpoint and own interpretation of a bunch of rules. And it, you know, you really are at the mercy of the Department of Buildings at the end of the day. And in New York in particular, it's become an extremely arduous process because the Department of Buildings, for a number of reasons, but they're basically overrun. They've got way too many things coming in for them to review. And the code book, there's something like 4 open accessible codes right now in New York. You can file a project under one of 4 different codes. I mean, what the fuck? Come on. So you can pick a different set of rules, and then the examiner goes back and reviews your drawings and makes his determinations about your compliance with the rules and gives you some feedback. And then you have to respond to his feedback. Very rarely do you get through that process without something, no matter how much you think you've crossed all your T's and dotted all your I's. Very rarely do you get through that review process without something getting pointed out.
So I'm sorry, we're going to have to wrap in a few minutes, but just quickly, you're talking about construction things. Like, take it further into the sonic world. Say you built and everything is built, and
it sounds like shit. We don't do that.
What sonic issues could you run into?
I can speak to that. For me, the thing that so when I don't, because, you know, sometimes we just build a room that's done by another designer. Sometimes we actually do the design work. And the thing that I should say, like, these days, what I'm trying to really refine is low-end linearity in a room. And a lot, because I don't have, you know, acoustic modeling software, things like that. I use basic principles, but when we're doing, you know, things like membrane panels, tuned panels for low-end absorption in a space, you have formulas and things like that, but you really never know what it's going to sound like until it's done, or what it's going to test like. So for me, that's the biggest challenge is, you know, I think, you know, anything above 500 hertz is pretty easy in my view, and it's pretty easy to make sound good. It's the low end and making it linear in a space, that's the real challenge. And sometimes, you know, I've finished rooms, it's getting better, but, you know, definitely when I started, you really don't know until the room comes together, and there's plenty of room and that's a very difficult thing to fix, you know, after a space is built, or even during construction.
You're right on the money, Jim.
Yeah.
Well, excellent, guys. Look, we're going to have to wrap, and really honored to have all you guys with us. And I know John feels the same, and what a special group of guys, and really awesome to meet you all, for those I don't know. And really, thanks for your time.
Thanks for having us.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Stay healthy.
Thank you.
Yeah, man.
Stay healthy, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.
That's right.
Thank
Best
you.
wishes.
Best wishes.